Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you for all of your attention this morning. This is a process, this is my 19th year in our district, and we have never gone through a process like this, so I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the partnerships that we've created, not only with our friends in law enforcement and fire, but through this process, we have joined partnerships with MPU, our utilities in town, with State Patrol. We've joined with them. We have transit involved in this as well, and numerous other people. This process is huge for a community like we have. We have over 5,000 students in our district. In order to do what we're doing now, we have to be organized, and I feel like we're at a point where we've made that transition. Here's the overview for what we're going to have this morning. We're going to talk briefly about what you just saw out there to give you an overview. Then we're going to dive into the standard response protocol. Those of you who have been around a while, you remember those 6 lanes and all those different pieces that we had with all the details underneath of it. We've simplified that process by utilizing the SRP. You should have posters in every room and every building. We're going to cover that process in a little bit more detail for you today to try to create that knowledge, but also to create questions that you might have. When those questions arrive, write them down, put them in your phone, tell a friend, however you got to record them. And you're going to get an exit ticket sent to you in an email. That email will come out today. You'll be able to not only see the videos that you need to watch to reacclimate yourself, the ones that you'll use to share with your students if that's the avenue you're choosing at your building to share with your students this SRP process, but you'll have the information that you'll be able to refer to, because everything that we're doing is through the I Love You Guys Foundation right here. Let me just briefly tell you about it. I mean briefly, and then we'll jump into our process. The I Love You Guys Foundation is started right after or shortly after Columbine out in Colorado by John Michael and Ellen Keyes. Their daughter was in Platte Canyon High School and was murdered in that school. They made it their life's mission to help schools through this process, because what they saw was they were somewhat organized, but there needed to be more. There needed to be a standard process for this. So they've made it their life's mission. Now, one of the amazing things about their foundation is that everything that we're doing is technically free. Doesn't matter what school district you are, what business you are, what college campus you are. You can access all of the material and the training materials and the PowerPoints, everything for free, because they believe in this process. I'll come back to why we're utilizing this process, but these folks, when you go on and you watch their story, and some of you will, I know, because you'll go on YouTube and look up, you'll see their stories. I've met John Michael Keyes. We had him in town last year for a training with the Department of Justice. We partnered with them as well. We brought him in for a training, then we brought him down to Lake Geneva, and we did a training with them. Their heart and their passion is incredible, and it's all because of what they know we're in the process of doing, and that's helping students learn. That's our goal. But we also got to make safe learning environments. So that's the process we're going to walk through. So let me do some introductions. Lieutenant Barrett is here from the police department. Lieutenant, when I was thinking about Paul in an introduction this morning, I realized that Paul and I started together 19 years ago together at Washington. Mary Beth is nodding her head because she was with us. We started together 19 years ago. The man's got a passion for helping people. Right now he's a training lieutenant, and he has helped us to get to this process. Paul, can you just briefly touch on why I Love You Guys and what we're doing now is important to you?
It's important to me because, of course, I care about staff. My wife's a school teacher in the district at Jackson, so I care about you guys, and of course the kids. So it's important that we have a plan to keep you guys safe and the students safe. And this plan, we did some research, like Mike talked about. It wasn't just like Mike or I going, yep, let's do this. We did some research, and we found that I Love You Guys Foundation was the best plan for us. That's what we're going with, okay? All the work is done. We just have to learn it. And like you said, the more we learn about it, the better we're going to be prepared to implement it and use it. That's important.
We've had a team involved in this from our district, from many other entities. That team has included our fire department. Our fire chief sits on that community. We have many of the administrative staff from our police department, Chris Dupre, our building and grounds director. We have principals. We have teachers on that team. We had a group of people that have walked through this process with us to try to figure out where we got to plow this field. Sorry about the farmer analogy, I got farming blood. We had to plow a new field, and so that's what we did, but we're not going to do it alone. And now the process is going to be turned over to you to figure out where are we at on this? How are we doing with all this? So let me recap what you just saw. You were at your building. You had to evacuate your building. One of the things that I believe in is that we can practice and train all of these pieces, including evacuation, lockdowns, holds. We can practice with minimal trauma to our students and staff. We don't have to make this about a gunman getting into a building. It does not have to be traumatic. We got to practice the routines. We got to get to a point where we understand what we have to do for all of it. One of the reasons that we love this process is because it's an all hazards approach. When we examine as a district every year, we review all these different programs that are out there, and mind you, we've listened to a lot of them. We've had them in to speak to us about their programs. The one thing that jumped out, and Paul would attest to this, one thing that jumped out is this was the one process that took in all hazards. It's not about one thing. It's not about a shooter getting in your building. Now, yes, that can happen, but I will guarantee you that you will do one of these for real this year, because something will happen that you'll have to know, and you need to know the process. You need to know we have a plan, and you need to know what your part in that plan is. This is an all hazards approach. But today you evacuated your building because a simulated gas leak didn't allow for you to be back in your building. That doesn't mean that every time this stuff happens, we're going to evacuate our buildings. Please know we're planning for this, and the amount of hours and dollars that have been spent from all the different people being a part of it, I hope it never happens. We will not evacuate a building lightly. But if we do, it's because we can't go back in that building for some reason. And you know, as soon as that gets out in our community, parents will say, I want my kid back. I do too. So we're going to evacuate that building. In order to do that with an orderly fashion, we had to come up with a process. The processes that we had before, and somebody mentioned it, I heard it in the hallway, boy, we used to go to all these other campuses. We may still use some of those pieces depending on what happens, but in a general sense, if we have to evacuate any one of our 10 campuses now, we're coming here if we need to reunify with those parents, because we can simplify the process here. We have all the tools we need here, and we have all the people and process or props that we need to make that happen right here. The process that you then walk through is all the different rooms that would be utilized in this campus. And I got to give a huge shout out to the UW. This has been an ongoing conversation with them as well. UW Manitowoc, which is UW Manitowoc Green Bay Manitowoc campus now, has been amazing to work with. I mean, you just come out here, it's beautiful. Go stand out there in that cafeteria, it's beautiful. But the people out here have been incredible to help us all the way up to Green Bay, and the people that are involved. They're willing to give us their campus if we need to do this. What they would be doing is they'd be evacuating. We've given them a 30-minute time frame, and they said, we can do that. We'll evacuate this building. They're going to give us their staff to help us. They'll evacuate, and we'll come in and take over to reunify, because this is a community-wide effort, and this is a community place. If that happens and we have to come here, you now know there's a process for it. Now, again, we hope this never happens, and I would love to plan for this for however many years I have left on this earth. But if we do, know that you might be involved as a teacher with kids, but we also might call on some of you to be out here to help with that process. If it's another building and we need assistance out here, we have an entire kit that's set up. Actually, we have two of them. We have a backup to the backup. We have kits set up that actually have every role that would happen. So we have greeters, for example. Greeters that'll meet the parents out in the parking lot. You're going to get a lanyard if you're a greeter, and it's going to say greeter. On the back, it's going to tell you exactly what to do. We have every one of those roles laid out. Paul has coordinated with law enforcement, with state patrol, that if we need, we can call them here. You want to talk about that process a little bit?
So basically, if we have the worst case scenario, an active shooter event, all of our staff will be at that location. So we want to make sure that as we're busing students and staff here, we want to make sure this facility is secured. So State Patrol has agreed to send minimum 11 patrolmen, state troopers, to basically secure this facility so that we can bring you out here and be safe. And that's a big partnership, and we're pretty lucky to have that, so we're pretty excited about that. So just know that once you get here, you will not be brought here until this is secure and safe.
And again, this is an all hazards approach. We may be coming here because of a gas leak in our building that can't be rectified and we need to get out. Might be something else. But we might be here for something that simple, but we got to reunify. Now, one thing, and I got Lincoln in the room right now, one thing I have heard since I have been here about Lincoln is that, oh, the students aren't going to follow us if we do this. Here's what I'll tell you, because I've been studying this stuff for a long, long, long time. What I can tell you is, from every report I've read, every newscast I've watched, when the staff know the plan and when they are confident in what they have to do, the students follow like sheep behind them. But if they look at your eyes and they know you don't know the plan, they suddenly start to get that feeling. Maybe I need to find my own way, especially those older kids that you have. But I am telling you that high schools across this country, when they've had to evacuate for whatever reason, if you watch some of the news footage from the air, you can tell when those students are confident in that teacher because they're following them exactly how they need to go. We're going to jump into the standard response protocol. I'm going to remind you again, if you have questions, write them down, put them in your phone, tell a neighbor, because the details to what we're doing come in the practice. You got to know the plan, you got to practice the plan. We're going to practice that plan a lot this year. Every month there's a coordinated effort. We have a district safety calendar now that every building will practice that same protocol that month. We're going to give you simple training scenarios every month that you'll be able to read or discuss however your administration wants to work through that process. But we're going to give them to you so you can start to think, well, what if this happened? None of them are hopefully going to be traumatizing. But we're going to practice this over and over and over. The details, though, come in your practice of it. If you were to exit your room right now, which you just did, do you have everything you need? Because what if I told you today you can't go back in that room for an undetermined amount of time? What if that room right now was a crime scene? What if that school was a crime scene and you're not able to go back in? Now, I hope you're not that person who only has one key for their car, like my oldest kid, and you left that key in the school, because I can tell you that I don't care. He doesn't care. Captain Vorpal, who was here, I don't know if he's still here, Captain Vorpal of detectives doesn't care about your key for your car if he's got a crime scene to take care of. Your key is going to stay there till he tells you it's clear to go back to that building. Did you have everything you need today? Did you bring it with you? If not, those are the details that you start to work out to say, if I got to leave here in a hurry, where do I put it? What do I do with it? How do I make myself mobile? Because it might be simple as a gas leak, but we might not get back in. What if they say, you know what, we can't shut it off for a while. It's going to keep going. You're not going back in. You got your phone? Most people remember their phone. Standard Response Protocol, SRP. I'm sorry if I go back and forth SRP and if you don't get it. The PowerPoint that you're going to see is all accessible by you if you go to the I Love You Guys Foundation. Everything we're sharing with you, you'll be able to use. You want to take this to your classroom and share it with your students, with your colleagues, with your learning team. You have access to everything we're showing you and more today. We're going to jump right in. Paul, did I miss anything else in the beginning?
No, that's good.
The poster. And as you see, if you're quick to notice, there's the fifth icon missing. This actually is an early poster from the foundation early on before they had the hold. They put the hold in a couple years after they got going because they realized that we're not always doing lockdowns. We're not always doing lockouts. We got to have something intermediate. We, a lot of times would, in the past, use what was called a medical lockdown. And we would call a medical lockdown for such thing as the canines were coming to our building. Wasn't really the right use of it, but it worked. We don't have to do that anymore because now this has a hold on it. The poster that you all should have a copy of it. I hope you have a black and white copy today, but you should have a color copy of it. That color copy lists on it what the teachers do, what the students do. When you're sharing it with your students, you don't need anything. I can tell you that every one of you are smart enough people that you could teach a group right now of what to do on each one of these because the process is right here. It's that simple. The details are in the practice of it, but the process is right here. What you do, what students do right here. We're not hiding it from anybody. Now, will it deviate from this? Absolutely, there'll be times that it deviates. Depends on where you got to go, what you got to do. One of the things I'm just going to quickly point out, I want to remind you every time, on that teacher column, one of the things you see is attendance. Attendance is everyone. In the past, on our drills, one of the things that was lacking is we didn't take attendance every time. That's a problem for us. Because if we lose a student, or we lose a staff member, you notice I said both, because you're equally important to me. If we lose them in any one of these processes, that's a problem. So we take attendance everywhere we go. We take attendance on everyone. That's one thing you have to remember from this. I take attendance at every step. Now you do it when it's safe to do. There's the 4 that we begin with, and the 5th is the hold. So you have a lock out, the hands up, lock it out, lock down, evacuate, and shelter, and then the 5th one is a hold. One of the reasons that we like this process from a standpoint of not only from a school, but from law enforcement, from fire, from anybody who's involved in this process, one of the reasons we like it is because it's a shared lexicon, a shared language. As this expands, and it's expanding to higher ed programs across this country and across the world now, but it's also expanding to businesses. We've been involved with some businesses, including MPU, who have started to explore some of these pieces to say, man, we could use this and have this same language everywhere. So imagine Johnny comes to school next week and you share it with him, and in a great place, Johnny goes to work with Dad at some point later on this year, and Dad's got the same poster but the business model hanging up at his office. And then Dad takes it and transitions it to home, because you can use this same process at home. Do you have a plan at home? We share it with first responders. I can tell you that first responders, our law enforcement, our fire, our EMS, they have a language, but there are times when it gets a little convoluted. Why is it important, Paul, that we have this shared language with the all and us?
Just important because once you call it, we'll know what you're doing, or if we ask you to go in a lock out because there's something in the area, we're talking the same language. You know what we want of you, and if you call it and tell us you're in that situation, we know what you're doing. Okay, we know what kind of response we need to do. Versus in the past, some buildings had different, the electrician with the red van, please move your van. Back in the day, that was an alert code that there was an unsafe event in a school. Okay, so we're trying to get away from that where we all know what's expected or what's going on.
We're sharing it with our students. We want them to know what is the basics of the plan on what we're going to do. There's a student responsibility in this. We want to share it with you so that you know it. We want to share it with parents. We have plans at every building on how we're going to get that out. Some are going to send it out hard copy, where they're going to send in a Friday folder, a poster with some verbiage on the back talking about what we're doing, what we're transitioning. Some may email. I'm not sure exactly what your buildings are doing, but we're going to get this message out to parents. They may have questions for you. That's okay if you don't have all the answers, because you're going to be able to find one of us to help you answer that. But we're not hiding this. We're not cowering from anybody on this. We got a plan. We got a process. You got to know the plan, and you got to practice the plan. Again, I'm repeating them. Lock out, lock down, shelter, evacuate, and that 5th one is hold. Wow, they're good. Public address. This is all great because we're going to put it over the PA system. Now, I know you guys practiced something today that your team at Lincoln worked on, and I was excited to talk with Lee a little bit as he was coming in about that process, and it seemed like it went fairly well. I'm sure there's some glitches, and some of you say it didn't work yet. But we're going to use that public address system. Do you know how to use your public address system at your building? If you had to call a lockdown right now, building-wide, do you know how to do it? If you don't, you need to start to figure that out. Because you say, well, in our building, we can't do it from our phones anywhere. And I'm on 3rd floor way in the corner, or I'm down in the gym. I'll never have to do that. What if it happens the day you're in the office picking up your mail, and you happen to be the one that somebody says, call a lockdown? Are you ready? If not, now's your time to start thinking about, how do I do that? In some of our buildings, and I don't know about your building, you can do that over the phone system. There's a code you punch in and you can access to the whole thing. I don't know if that happens at Lincoln and Stangl, but you got to figure that out. That's the details. Lockout. Now this PowerPoint again has a little slightly different language because they've updated the language. Lockout. The verbiage is lockout, get inside, lock outside doors. You're going to hear that repeated twice. Lockout, get inside, lock outside doors. Teachers, you're going to make sure that everyone gets indoors. You're going to make sure the outside doors are locked, which they always should be anyway. And you're going to go through the rest of those pieces. Students, we want to make sure they get inside. But in that lockout, business as usual. Now, why lockout? Lockout, generally speaking, is that something bad outside needs to stay out there, and we don't want it coming in. We want that piece to be out there. Maybe it's some criminal activity. Maybe law enforcement has something going on, and they want to notify, or they notify us, hey, we want your building on a lockout. We got a traffic stop going on out here, and right now it's not real friendly. Great. Could be a dangerous animal. If you had a dog phobia, that might be dangerous. What happens? No one in or out. Now this is a hard one because no one goes in or out. We have signs for the doors. You'll see them. Your principals and your staff, you guys will have to figure out what doors need to have those signs on so that we post those signs in that lockout to remind people don't come in and out. We got to work through the details district-wide. How are we going to notify those people who are travelers? Some of you are in this room right now. What if I'm a traveler and I get to Lincoln and it says that? Turn around and walk away. Nobody's going in or out. They're in a lockout. That's hard. Students, we want to make sure we get them in the building. If it happens early in the morning, they're out on the playgrounds, they're shuffling in, or maybe even if it's second hour and they're still rolling in. I suppose that happens a little bit. We want to get everybody in the building, survey your area, make sure they get inside. That's your responsibility. Make sure that you get everyone inside, because if it's a lockout, there's something outside that is a problem, and we don't want them exposed to it. Again, make sure those outside doors are locked. Please, 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 don't unlock those doors for your building during your school day. I know it's so tempting because you're just going to run out and do something and you prop that door open. Don't do it, because that's the time something bad is going to happen. Find a friend, say, hey, I'm going out to my car. Can you hold the door for me? Bring your keys. Walk the extra steps. But don't prop those doors open. Take attendance. Note the time. We want to take attendance regularly, but we do it in every one of these processes. But then business as usual. We're in a lockout. We're going to monitor those exits. But if you got kids, you're teaching. Hey, you know what? We got this thing going on. We're going to lock the doors, but we're going to keep going. It's outside. If it changes, you'll be notified. You guys, Mr. Tennis practiced a great thing today by blasting that out on IC. Because if you have your phones, we can blast it to you right where you are. I checked my phone right here before. You didn't even know it, did you? I was teaching. I can do it. You can do this. You can get through this process. If we're in a lockout, you just roll with it. Who can call a lockout? Anyone in this room. You see something that says to you, that's a problem outside, and if it got in this building, it would be a problem in this building, call a lockout. Now, in the past, what we've often thought that we should do is I should call the office. Because the people in the office, where are my office people? I saw some people in the office, they're just sitting there waiting for my phone call. Crap, I don't know about you, but that phone doesn't stop ringing some days. And that's a good thing, because those are families trying to interact with us. But you may not get through to them. Don't call the office if you feel like it needs to be done at that moment. Figure out how you call a lockdown. Now, you may be able to might have to find somebody on your floor. Lincoln's a big building. You might have to find somebody on that floor that has a radio, because you might have to get on that radio. I know you use your radios in your building. Get on that radio. Here's the deal. Mr. Kornick, we got somebody outside, blah, 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 blah. I think we need a lockdown right now. You got eyes and ears. Don't hand it off to somebody else. Call that lockdown. What's the worst that happens? It turns out it was that little white fluffy dog out on the playground. So what? So we just practiced it. At least we know we can do it. But the worst that happens if we don't do it, that's a problem for us. Call it. Don't be afraid to call it. Can we leave the school? Here's another big question. No, there's a problem outside. Stay there. Stay there. Find out what the problem is. Come up with an alternative plan. If you need to call your next school you're going to, okay. If you got to call your kid's school because you're supposed to pick them up for a doctor appointment, it happens. You got to make that phone call. There's a problem outside. There's a reason we're locking the doors. I don't want you going in harm's way. Here we go. Lockdown. This is one. Lieutenant Barron's going to take it. This is one that gives some people a little heartburn.
So this is a situation where the problem is inside the building, okay? So locks, lights, out of sight. repeating, lockdown, locks, lights, out of sight. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to turn off your lights, keep your door locked all the time, right? So all you have to do is shut it, so now it's locked. You're going to move your students out of sight, okay? We call the hard corner. You know, if your door's here and it's got a window, if they're way where Mike is, nobody can see him. If I'm looking in the window, I can't see people in that corner, right? That's what we want to do. A locked door in a school setting is a time barrier. It's been proven to save lives, okay? That's what you're doing, because the situation is unsafe in your building, somewhere in your building. We said move away, turn off the lights. So if the person comes by, the door is locked, they look in, they don't see anybody, they're going to go to the next room, okay? They're not going to try to get in. Try to keep your students silent as much as possible. So somebody knocks on the door, hey, let me in. You know, police department, open up, let me in. Principal, so-and-so, let me in. Are you going to open the door? No, okay? If somebody needs to get in your room, it'll be law enforcement or a principal with keys. Do not open the door for anyone. Do not converse with the person. You're in hide mode, okay? In case it's the dangerous person trying to lure you out. Turn off your lights, kind of covered that. Locks, lights, out of sight. It's a big one. A lot of times if you only have one window like this, you can easily hide in your room without covering that window, okay? But Mike had told me some of the science rooms are different where you have two doors with windows on both sides. You might have to cover one door and just keep it covered all the time. So you have a spot where you could move kids out of sight. Every situation is a little different. But it does give us some benefit when SWAT or we're trying to enter the room. It does give us some benefit if we can see in slightly, okay? Some of the older teachers might remember when we used to slide cards outside. You know, green, everything's okay in here. Red, I'm missing somebody. Don't do that, okay? Because what would that do? That'd let the bad guy know there must be somebody in there because there's cards outside the door, okay? So we don't do anything like that, okay? Don't tip your hat to let them know where you are. Plus, the law enforcement's not going to trust it anyways, okay? Again, maintain silence, take attendance. Like Mike said, it's a really big thing. Throughout these steps, we're always taking attendance to make sure we didn't lose anybody. So what's the difference between a lock out and a lock down? Big thing is it's where the threat is. If I'm locking out, the threat's outside the building. I'm locking down, the threat's inside our building, okay? That's the big difference. So what if you're outside? So I'm outside at recess or I'm outside at gym class. I hear them call a lockdown. I'm already outside. I don't go back in the building because the threat's inside the building. Why would I want to enter where the threat is? So if I'm already outside, you could go to your off-site reunification. So for most of you, it was MPU. You could go to another school. You go to a safe place, okay? And then you just want to make sure at some point you call in the school attendance and let them know where you are. Hey, I took my class to MPU, we're waiting there. Just so we're not wondering, well, what happened to the Spanish class or whatever? Where are they, okay? So then we'll know where they are. It's important. If there's no teacher, what we'll tell the kids is, if I was out in the hallways, I'm a student going to the bathroom, I didn't make it back to a locked classroom, hey, open up, I need to come in. As a teacher, are you going to let that person in? No. I mean, you surveyed quickly to see if you saw any students to grab them and pull them in, but once you lock the door, nobody comes in. So the students, the big things to tell them is they're going to try to find a place where they can run into, close the door, to hide in that room, or they might have to evacuate the building, okay? So there's options. Sometimes if they think the best course of action is just to leave because there's no place to hide or anything like that, they might do that. And again, we'd encourage them then to call their parents, call the school when it's safe. Big one, fire alarm. We're so conditioned, you guys are especially, fire alarm, kindergarten up, kids line up, boom, out the building under a minute. If we're in a lockdown and the fire alarm goes off, you don't react to it, okay? You stay in your position because some of these people are pulling the fire alarm to lure you out into the hallway so they can harm you. So unless you see, fire or smoke, you're going to stay at your location. If you did see smoke coming underneath the door, think of alternative ways to get out. Maybe break out a window, if you're on ground level and crawl out that way, okay? But the hallway is not a safe place during a lockdown. Can we text parents? Yes. What we'd like you to tell the students is not initially, not in the first 5-10 minutes of this lockdown. Try to keep them off their phones. And then after that, if it's safe, you don't hear anything, tell them, okay, you 5, go ahead and text your parents. Okay, they're done. You 5, text your parents. Because information's important. You know, once the parents hear about this, if they can't get a hold of their kid, panic, right? So it's really important that we allow those kids to do it, but not all 30 at once.
One of the reasons I was really excited about Lincoln testing that IC blast on an emergency like this is we'll be able to use that during an event. If we can show that it works and it's effective. Now, you got to remember there's got to be a backup, because my question would be, what if the power goes out? Is it still going to work? I don't know. But it could be a great tool for us to communicate out to you. I know a couple years ago at Madison, we had that locked down. We were in there for quite a while. We sent emails, and that wasn't a great way to do it. It worked to some degree, but there were people who weren't at their computers. But most of us have our phones. We'll be able to help you with that message. So we'll remind you, hey, here's a time. Now you can tell 5 of your students to text their parents, tell them they're safe. We're in a lockdown. That's all they need to say. We can help you with that message, because you may not remember to do that. But we're going to help you walk through that process. Again, know the plan, practice the plan. That's where the details come in. Evacuate. That's what you just did today. You evacuated your building for whatever reason. You had to get out of that location. You're going to leave your stuff behind if you're students, not staff. Now, you're not going to necessarily grab your book bag. That may not be the best thing. But if you can grab the 2 important things you probably need, your phone and your car keys, that's going to be okay to have in your pockets. Now, some of you are going to say, well, I don't have pockets. I'm wearing a dress. That's okay. There's other places you can house that on you. I'm just going to leave it at that. Why'd they laugh at that? Listen for directions. You did a great example of it today, and I was excited that it was Lincoln doing what you were doing, because Lincoln is a monstrous building, and you all go out to different areas, and how are we going to rally you all together and get you to leave from that spot? Well, today you knew this was coming, but what if you didn't know and you got outside? Now we got a communication tool that we can at least work on. But we got to figure out how we're going to get that message to you. Now, at some of the smaller schools, I know Stangl, you're working on getting all to one location. Some of the other elementaries, they go into one spot. They leave wherever they are in that building, go all the way around to that spot in the back or in the front, wherever that safe area might be. But you want to listen for instructions. You're going to get those instructions in an evacuation, hopefully over your PA. Take attendance. Have I said this before? Take attendance. This is where we lose people when we start to move people. I was a little worried we were going to lose people today walking down the hallways, but we didn't. Paul wants to touch on self-evacuation.
So again, self-evacuation might be you're in that lockdown, and if you had information, like I'm going to keep picking on Lincoln, the information is there's a shooter or a dangerous person in JFK. And you're all the way at the other end of the building by the auditorium, okay? If you have good information, it might be safer for you just to leave. And you know, hey, I have an exit door right there. You know, and that might be your choice. But you always got to look at, it's kind of grade dependent too. You know, if I'm a kindergarten teacher, it might be harder for me to, you know, run out with, 20 little kindergarten kids versus you guys in high school. You know, what's the mobility of your students, okay? But again, I want to stress, a locked door is a time barrier. And in a school setting, it's a very safe thing. So evacuation will only be if you have specific information that you know the threat is in a completely different part of the building and you know that you have an exit very close by. Okay?
It's a critical piece, because sometimes we rely on that information we get over the PA to help us to get to where we need to be, want to be. We may not have that during that, and you may have to evaluate what are my best options. Really what we're doing is we're starting to get you to think on your feet, not only at school, but all the time. Think on your feet. What would I do if? How many of you looked, don't raise your hands, how many of you looked around here and know where your exits are right now, that you could get out in a real big hurry in this room? Some of you. Start to think about that process. Talked a little bit about where do you go before you get to that safe location. You might have to find that if you're evacuating with students, and I say if you're evacuating with them, you got to find that safe location and then notify. Make sure in evacuation that you're taking attendance. You see where this has been a problem? They keep repeating the same thing about attendance. We're taking attendance. Bring your phone. How many of you remember? This one, raise your hand. How many of you remember those phones and touch those phones? You look around, you young people. That was a real thing. How many people know what a bag phone is? How many had bag phones? And we thought we were the coolest thing ever. We were. We still are, aren't we?
Yes.
Again, take attendance. Knock, knock, knock. Police, open up. This is one thing you got to think about in that lockdown, and we're going to practice it this year when we do our lockdown drills. We are not going to release you from a lockdown drill this year like we have in the past. In the past, we've got on the PA and said, all clear, you're good to go. No more. Because in a real lockdown, we're going to have principals, myself, Mr. Dupre, Mr. Holzman, whoever has keys, who is an administrator, some position in that building, or law enforcement, clearly identified, such as a lieutenant parent. They're going to come around room to release you, because if we were in a lockdown, that meant that threat, that bad situation was in the building. And I don't want anybody opening that door until they know that's not the bad guy. I know him, or I can clearly identify him or her. Knock, 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 police, open up. You got to evaluate, do I really know that person? How can I identify them? Again, what can you take with you? Remember to grab your phone and your keys. I'll say it over and over. What will the police do in this evacuation or those kind of things where they might come and move you? So let's say you're in a lockdown and now you're evacuating. What are police going to do, Lieutenant?
I mean, we're not always going to know where the threat is, what locations. When we come in that room, we might be kind of loud. We might be pointing guns at people. So expect that. Just follow our instructions, okay? The big thing is we're going to want to see your hands, spread your fingers, okay? This isn't a time where, oh, the cops are here. Well, now I'm going to start grabbing my property and put my keys and phone in, right? That doesn't look good. Have that in your pockets when they come in. Have your hands visible and just do what they say, okay? They're probably going to pat people down just to make sure that there's nobody with a weapon inside the room. They might pull over a couple people. Teacher, come over here. Are these all your students? Is there anybody in here with a gun? Is there any threat in this room? No. They might then pull over a kid. Is everybody okay in here? Is there anybody with a weapon in here? No. Okay. And then we'll maybe pat you down and then move you out. Okay? But just be prepared that you might see guns pointing in your direction, because again, they don't always know if somebody's in that room for sure. The shelter. Basically, the command would be, shelter, hazard, and safety strategy. So, it's a hailstorm, it's a tornado, whatever it is, they're going to tell you what that effect is. Shelter in place, go to your tornado location. Okay? It'll be followed with instructions. Now, if it was a tornado warning, could I also call it an evacuation? Evacuate to your tornado location, evacuate to your tornado location or shelter. Principal could kind of decide, it's the same thing, right? If I tell you to shelter and go to your tornado location, or I tell you to evacuate to that location, both work, right? As long as you get to the right location. But we'll tell you to shelter and we'll give you a hazard, what the risk is. Go to the storm shelter. You probably haven't done a lot with hazmat, hazardous materials, but you might see this in the future where each classroom's got a roll of tape and some plastic. In case there's some type of chemical spill in the area, we might have you tape up door vents. The maintenance would turn off the ventilation system so we're not circulating the air. But again, they'll always give you the instructions, what's expected. But again, be prepared for anything, okay? I mean, a number of years back, we had the bad storm that hit, what year was that? The hailstorm wiped out St. Nazians and all that. It affected the schools in Manitowoc. So you gotta be prepared for that. And again, and we said this before, take attendance, okay? It's really important to take attendance, note the time of who you have.
Hold, the final piece. A hold is going to be used when that situation deems that we need to stop you from moving, but there's not necessarily a threat, but there might be a problem. For example, a number of years ago, when I was at Washington, we had a staff member went down a short flight of stairs, and when she got to the last step, she slipped and went out, and her leg fractured. It was in multiple places. She could not be moved. We looked at the time. Sure enough, the bell was about to ring for lunch. Well, I don't know about anybody else, but if you've ever been in a junior high at lunch, junior high boys, when they're hungry, especially that A lunch, that first one, they're flying. We went into a medical lockdown at that point. We would use a hold now because we knew we were going to have to get EMS into that hallway to help this situation stabilize this patient and then take care of her, but we couldn't go anywhere. So we would go into a hold. We'll use the holds for a lot of different reasons, but basically it comes down to that. We want to keep those halls clear. We got something going on, but if we're in a hold, please know that doesn't mean that there's some major event going on and we're trying to hide it from you. If we're in a hold, it's because we're not in a lockdown or a need for a lockdown or a lockout. We're using it for the right purpose. Again, knowing the plan and practicing the plan. Students remain in their classrooms till all clear. This would be the exception to what I just said before. This would be a situation where we would get on the PA and we would give you the all clear. The hold is clear, and you'd be able to resume normal or ring bells or however it needs to be adjusted. You want to make sure that you close and lock your classroom door. If there's anybody in the halls, you'd bring them in. As we wrap up here and bring this plane in for a landing, again, we're going to communicate to parents. Each building is doing that. And then we'll do that as the year moves on. There's been some talk about how we make that happen in other communities, but we're not hiding this. We have plans. You have to know the plan. We will practice the plan with you. This is phase 2 of 3 steps. Phase 1 you got in the spring when your SRO or somebody came into your building and showed you a video. Again, you're going to watch that video again. You may choose to share that video, depending on your building, with your students, because it's really good. Where that girl goes through, the same girl goes through all 5 of these. You're going to evaluate this for yourself. Where's my spot that I'm most of the time in? Some of you are mobile all the time. Well, you got to start to really examine then all of this. What do I do if? These posters should be up everywhere. You should be able to find them. If you need more of them, I think you know how to send stuff to printing. If you don't, contact somebody in your building who does. We can get more of them. This is really about shared lexicon, information, and understanding between students, staff, and those first responders, but I would add to that the parents, because parents are critical in this. After Sandy Hook, I read the Sandy Hook report that came out after some time, and it's quite lengthy. Please don't read it. But in that report, one of the pieces that had stuck with me since I read it was the reunification process. They weren't ready for it. And nobody's ever really ready for it. But we're further ahead than we were last year. We're further ahead than we were yesterday, now here in Manitowoc. But the critical piece to all of this is you. Because you know what? We can have all these great things. We can lock doors. We can have cameras and PAs and bells. But I'm telling you, the bottom line, and you'll see it in my email, is that through relationships is how we're going to make people and help people to feel safe and to help them to learn. Through relationships, we're going to build safe, caring, learning environments that are loving. When you build a relationship with somebody and you're eyeball to eyeball with them and you build a connection, that one person who's sitting by him or herself all the time might be the person that needs that relationship the most, and you have no idea what you might have just stopped. You have no idea what you might have just changed for them. Because one of the things we do know in our society, it's really hard to hurt somebody who cares for you. Now, we do it all the time. Our kids do it to us, right? Those of you who are parents, yeah, that happens, but it's really hard. Build those relationships. You want a safe school? Yes, we got to do all this stuff. Yes, we got to have the doors locked, the cameras on, the PAs. We got to have our SROs because they're building relationships. Most importantly, you are building relationships. And when you think about learning, and you think back, like Mr. Holzman talks about that teacher that he still thinks about, second grade teacher, it's because she built a relationship with him. Because he knew she cared about him. And when you know somebody cares about you, you're not alone. When you're not alone, it's suddenly a better world. When you're alone, it's a lonely world. You're the difference. You got a plan, so know the plan. We're going to practice it with you. Phase 3 is practice all year long. You're going to get an exit slip sent to you today by your principal. It'll actually be a forward, I think, from Mr. Brunbauer. You didn't get it yet, so you can't even share it. When you get it, it's going to ask you a couple questions. It's going to share the videos. Bookmark those videos. If you're going to share them with your students, if that's how you're doing it, bookmark it. If you're going to walk through on a poster, make sure you have the poster ready to go. However you're going to teach it with your students in your building. And if you haven't had a plan, talk to your principals. But you're going to share that plan with your students and practice it then as this year goes on. I thoroughly appreciate the attention today, because I got to tell you, I know how it is. We're coming back. You're a little, it's the beginning of the year. I get it. But you're amazing. And you're going to go out there and you're going to be amazing with our students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you.